What does your sign say anyway? It doesn't matter what your sign says!
So the redistricting wipeout continues to get worse for Democrats. One could argue they really kicked up a hornet's nest in California and Virginia that they are already coming to regret. And please understand, I'm not exaggerating when I explain it really is that bad for them. And if you don't believe me, we can simply look to the behavior of crazy left-wing activists who clearly seem to understand that this is catastrophic for their political coalition. As we speak, they are attempting to stage January 6th style events at various different Republican state legislatures to block the process of redistricting, which really means, let's not forget, as they say, attempt to overthrow democracy. Because as we know, the people of these states elected these representatives who are currently carrying out the will of Republican voters. We saw the proof of that this week in the Indiana primary. But of course, here we have these domestic terrorists and insurrectionists trying to overthrow American democracy. So quite obviously, by the logical standards that they have set for society, all of these people should be facing a minimum of 25 years in federal prison. They are terrorists. They are armed insurrectionists, etc., etc. But all ridicule aside, although it is warranted, we should also be honest. Maybe there's a reason why leftists are acting this insane and crazy. Because again, it is that bad for them. Why is it that bad? Because, as we've explained in many past videos on redistricting, in a lot of ways, the Democrat political control that they claim to have over this country is completely fake. Not only is it the case that their party has pretty egregiously gerrymandered congressional districts, especially in the past census, despite claiming to be the party who's against gerrymandering, but secondly, of course, when we look to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, it has been the case for many decades that Republican states, especially in the South, are effectively forced to gerrymander by federal mandate on behalf of Democrats. We're basically giving Democrats an inherent DEI advantage. And then you look, for example, to the 2024 election when Trump won pretty overwhelmingly and we took the Senate with 53 seats, but you wonder why the House majority is so slim. People don't really understand, part of that, sure, Mike Johnson, the RNC, a lot of institutional failings, but a big part of that also is literally just because of gerrymandering, because the districts have been rigged against us. And ironically, it so often happens to be the case that when leftists are actually forced to play fair in the game they claim to call democracy, they quite literally riot and throw a fit about all of that. And now that is exactly what is happening. Because post-VRA decision from the Supreme Court, but especially, I would argue too, happening at the same time as the Indiana primary where the anti-Trump RINOS who refused to redistrict got taken out. We covered that earlier in the week. We've sort of now created a political situation, I can't believe I'm saying this, but where the Republican Party actually has to do something. Republicans actually are being forced by both political and legal pressure to start playing to win for real. Because we already talked in the past about how the courts are now mandating Louisiana to comply with the SCOTUS decision before the midterms, and they have to redistrict basically right now. But considering that logic may apply to other states, and by the way, Republican voters just showed this week, if you're going to be one of these sleepy geriatric RINO incumbents who refuses to get the job done, we will vote you out. Notice how you put those two together, and a lot of these deep southern states that sometimes are not always the best, like say Alabama, Tennessee, in terms of, like Republican politicians really upholding the will of their voters. And now all of that stuff is happening. We are watching these redistricting attempts happen in states where we were a little bit skeptical of over whether that would get done, and the left-wing freakout as a result is just a sight to watch, a sight to behold, to say the least. Let's get into it, guys. And this is just good news, optimistic news, right? Republicans do something. Round of applause, finally, right? But anyways, first though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, let us begin with the development today out of Tennessee, where the House didn't pull in Indiana here, round of applause, officially passed the new congressional maps, which now would eliminate the state's only Democrat district. And of course, this is a byproduct largely of the Supreme Court decision and the precedent that it sets. And then take a look at what Democrats in the chamber decided to do. Did they decide to accept the results of democracy with class and grace, or did they engage in a bunch of election denial? Well, I'll let you see that for yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's remind ourselves that while we're here in this special session...
Mr. Trooper, please clear out that balcony over there. Please clear out the balcony. Leader Lamberth. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the remainder of my time.
Leader Lamberth yields the rest of his time. We're voting. We are voting on the bill. All those in favor of House Bill 7003 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote?
Oh dear gosh. Well, I don't want to go on a rant for 20 minutes about these scumbags, but there's just so much I have to say. Let's start with the obvious. First and foremost, leftists, do you actually think this is a good look? You know, we're going to just stand up and scream like children, horns and all this nonsense. You know, like the average person's going to watch that on TV or something and think, oh, I stand with the crazy mentally ill lunatics who are screaming and making a bunch of noise. I stand with this ridiculous clown car of, you know, they have like all the black Democrat congressmen standing together and holding hands in this protest line. I swear, for about 60 years now, leftists have been trying to cosplay or recreate the aura of the civil rights movement or something. And maybe for a little while it had some appeal, but I have to just be honest, we're just sick of watching this. Okay, we have protester fatigue. It's not cool. It's not even trendy anymore at this point. It's frankly really annoying. We want all of you people to get a job. And I'm not even just speaking in that case as a partisan MAGA conservative or something. I genuinely think there's a lot of Americans who are just tired of like going anywhere or just like seeing something happen, and then these crazy leftists, these paid Soros organizers in many cases, just put on the whole song and dance. But of course, second question is, you know, I would argue, to be honest, law enforcement are not really doing their jobs in this case. You know, they're trying to hold them back, protect them from the protect the legislators from the crazy angry mob. But first and foremost, let's not forget what you just witnessed was insurrection. Okay, again, they tried to block the certification of a legitimate process happening within Congress. Okay, so insurrection. Okay, so domestic terrorism. So they were trying to storm the Capitol and overthrow the government. I'm not even really being tongue in cheek about that, by the way. Sincerely, there's a strong case to be made. They were putting these legislators in far more danger than anyone did on January 6th. You know why? You saw them there face to face with the state reps. For whatever reason, they're not driven out of the room. By the way, we know how violent leftists are. We've watched them try to assassinate people on a regular basis at this point and then celebrate it. Like political violence is celebrated and mainstream within the Democrat voter base. That is an undeniable fact, by the way. So the idea that, you know, we shouldn't be, frankly, actually rounding up these people who are doing this stuff and arresting them is pretty disappointing, to say the least. I mean, hopefully it happens. Again, this is literally an insurrection, you know, that you just saw. And the last point I'd like to make, by the way, is what are you even actually protesting? Oh, the Republicans are gerrymandering in their favor. Okay, Democrats have done that too. And by the way, in the case of the Democrats, in some of these situations, it actually was illegal. For example, in Virginia, where they held a special session open for 2 years, which you can't do, and then use that to like rush through this referendum to make it on the ballot in time. The courts currently have blocked the passage of the actual referendum because of that. But did you see Republicans walking in there and, you know, holding hands and trying to stop the certification or the passing of that vote that happened there? Are we singing the songs and screaming and blowing the bullhorns and all this crap? Like, what actually are you so upset about? You know, oh, well, when Democrats gerrymander, you know, we're going to celebrate that and say that's democracy. But when Republicans do the same exact thing in retaliation in response to Democrat rigging attempts, no, well, maybe that's actually the point. And this is something that Republicans and conservatives ought to understand, is that, yes, the left is insane. Yes, the left, I guess, on some level is hypocritical. Like, here they are literally committing a January 6th to block democracy. But the truth and reality is that the left is simply very cynical about power. They understand that, right? They understand politics is a game that they are seeking to play to win. They will win by any means necessary. They will use whatever strategy works best for them at the time. And so, in contrast to that, as we spoke about earlier in the week with the Indiana Republicans who refused to redistrict, this is something we have to comprehend, right? We are not actually in a political battle against fundamentally moral or good or consistent people, okay? They're literally trying to take all the low blows they can to starve us out of power and then do what you have seen them indicate they're going to do when they take that power. Let me just say it's not good. And so obviously the response from our side has to be, just completely ignore this crap, okay? You see it for what it is. Don't be like the Indiana Republicans who are saying, oh, the leftists in our state are protesting, therefore, maybe we're not going to do it. We have to have courage, first of all. But then secondly, we need to be playing to win the game, playing by the similar rules that the left is if we actually want to have a chance at defeating the left, right? So which means, for example, if Democrats are going to rush through their own gerrymandering efforts, we can't just sit there and say, oh, well, that's inconsistent. You claim you're against gerrymandering. That's hypocritical of you. Okay, it is. So what, though? You have to act. Well, that's exactly why we have to redistrict in response. And very glad to see, Tennessee is a state that obviously very conservative electorate, very Republican supermajority. But as I said, oftentimes it is the case in the Deep South especially that because it is so Republican, a lot of the Republican reps have been there a million years. They're these geriatric rhinos. They won't do anything. But you see them now. Okay, they are acting, and it seems to me almost a lot of these state reps in Tennessee are getting younger, not older, as I look around. So, certainly good news to say the least. By the way, we got to check in on that good old guy, Justin Pearson. I don't know if anyone remembers him, right? This is the wannabe MLK cosplayer, right? The Gen Z Democrat. Anyone remember from the whole gun control protests back in 2023? But here he is once again for the second time, okay? Remember they did the January 6th, like the first time around after the whole Nashville school shooting committed by a trans, and the Democrats actually showed up to protest it with zero self-awareness. Well, here he is doing the same exact thing. Apparently this guy is still around and still pretending as if he is MLK, so.
Yeah, let Pearson go. Let Pearson. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? You stupid mother.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everyone, in case you forgot while watching that video and thought this might just be some random thug or entitled punk or something like that, that this is actually a sitting Democrat politician. He is a state legislator who is famously celebrated by the National Democrat Party as one of their Gen Z rising stars. He is the future. He is what we expect a model Democrat to look like. And apparently it's that right there. That's how sitting politicians should be treating the police officers who, whatever confusion was happening, in many ways are actually trying to protect them, trying to protect the politicians from the crazy mob of your own voters, Justin Pearson, who we have seen on a regular basis act violent because that is almost the nature of the left at this point. But still, nonetheless, you notice what he's doing there, right? Boy, F you. What the F is wrong with you? Like right in the face of the police, whatever it was he was saying. And I just want you to keep in mind, this is the very guy who is trying to claim that Jim Crow or segregation or Confederate racism or something like that is still in place in Tennessee, right? You saw his other friend, the other state rep guy, holding the Confederate flag and saying that, oh, we're coming back to the Confederacy or something. Justin, I know you're probably too young to realize this, but if segregation were still in place in the South, I don't think you'd be allowed to treat white police officers that way. As a matter of fact, you'd probably be forced to treat them in a way that is a lot more fitting and respectful towards police officers, okay? Like, what are you talking about? This is the guy. You see him, right? This is what they always try to say. Oh, well, it was Jim Crow. Look at segregation, these riots. Look at the police were spraying these hoses and stuff like that. Okay, well, where's the Jim Crow? Right? That's what Chuck Schumer and all these characters keep telling me. It's Jim Crow's coming back into place. It's segregation. Where's the segregation? Where's the segregation? All I see is actually some black young Gen Z politician with a huge superiority complex over white police officers, and frankly, acting in a way so entitled, he really even shouldn't be, but he is, okay? So, that is the current situation. And, just to be honest with you, in a truly just world, this guy already would have been in prison for the many different insurrections he has staged at his own state capital. He certainly would not be in political office, given that every time they try to do a right-wing vote over in Tennessee, he tries to rush and storm and interrupt the chamber with a huge, gigantic mob of leftists, and then acts in this very way. But, you can clearly, so much Jim Crow going on that it's the white police officer who's backing up from the crazy, Malcolm X MLK wannabe trying to be a lunatic. But anyways, the good news there is that Mr. Justin Pearson's vulgar and crass and ridiculous, crazy behavior was unsuccessful in blocking the vote today in Tennessee. But it doesn't stop there, because apparently over in Alabama, keep in mind, this is a state that previously said it would not redistrict, and then following the recent court decision basically mandating Louisiana do it, this chain reaction, as I said, started across the South, where the RINOs are now beginning to act. It's like the dominoes falling, where they're looking and saying, oh, that state did it, so we have to do it too. So the political and legal pressure here, again, that's why it's so important, because sitting on their own, otherwise Republicans probably wouldn't even be redistricting. They'd just be handing over the elections to the left. But this is why that stuff is so important. Apparently, though, today in Alabama, the state senators managed to ram through a 2026 redistricting bill in the middle of a tornado siren going off. Now, it's unclear to me, folks, to be clear, whether it was actually a tornado happening here, or Jamal Bowman was spotted in the Alabama state legislature, just pulling the alarms. But still, regardless, you have to give credit where it's due. For a state GOP that often doesn't really do a whole lot, here they are taking the issue seriously, taking political victory for our guys, the good guys, actually seriously. And I think that deserves credit. Check it out.
Call us back in. And say, now we didn't now they didn't call themselves coming back and trying to go. He didn't made the motion to pass the bill when we supposed to be going into recess.
So yeah, credit where it's due. For once, Republicans actually showed dedication in getting something done. But you add up the math as of recent weeks and as a result of that court decision. So we're now looking at about a gain of already about +7 seats that Republicans just picked up in the South. This would include the 4 in Florida, the 1 in Tennessee, the 1 in Alabama, and of course the original one in Louisiana that was the subject of the Supreme Court lawsuit. And then on the flip side, so as we covered in the past, the Virginia redistricting effort for now has been blocked by the courts via an injunction. It's unclear at the moment whether they'll actually be able to win the court case before the primary date and deadlines and all of that for those maps to go into place. Keep in mind that the Virginia Supreme Court upheld the injunction, so one could argue it's not looking that good for Virginia Democrats over there. And so, you add that up, you consider California obviously canceling out Texas, but even still then, we're looking at least R+7. If other states get their act together, it could be R+ anywhere from to 10, something like that, of an advantage going into the midterms. And I want people to understand, even if you think Democrats are going to have a very favorable performance, even with gas prices and all that, that really, 10 seats in the modern landscape of our politics actually is a lot, because our country is so polarized now. You can see over the years, these House majorities are getting slimmer and slimmer as compared to what they historically are, right? That's why both the blue waves and the red waves are getting smaller. So that advantage actually could mean everything. That could even mean that if we can get the gas prices under control and Iran sorted out by, June, and kind of get things on a better track in the domestic economy, before the midterms, I think honestly, call me delusional, they're looking to be something that could actually be genuinely competitive, just because of, the many different circumstances between redistricting, the still relative unpopularity of the Democrat Party. By the way, the actual engagement that I've talked about, we're seeing recently from Republican voters who historically in these off-year elections have not really shown up. But you look at the Texas primaries where an engaged voter base removed a lot of their RINO incumbents. Indiana, by the way, same exact thing. And to me, what I actually look at that and see is, oh, our voters are like tapped in now. They're engaged. They actually care. They're becoming higher propensity, because that's been the problem, is low propensity voters. The lower propensity voters are actually becoming higher propensity. They're getting more passionate. They're getting more involved. That trend is actually increasing. And by the way, I would argue, folks, this is a big reason why the southern states, as I said, who historically are not that inclined to act, they're kind of slow moving, the RINOs, okay, actually are this week going through with redistricting. It's no coincidence. They just saw what happened to the Indiana Republicans who betrayed their voters and didn't get it done. And they're saying, oh, shoot, we actually have to get it done. That's why I actually think especially Republican voters in Indiana deserve sincere credit for causing the redistricting to happen in other places, because the lesson there, the message clearly has been sent. And that's a good job and definitely positive news for the MAGA voter base.
5 of the 7 races, incumbent state senators who had rejected the president's push 5 months ago to redraw the maps, all losing to Trump-backed challengers.
So yeah, as we examine the redistricting efforts that are now taking place across the Deep South, I don't think we should forget that. I think we should certainly weigh the Indiana primary as a factor in all of this, right? The voters have sent a message, which I'm very happy, I'm very optimistic about. Hey, MAGA is awake. The base is alive. They haven't gone anywhere. And in fact, they want Republicans to play to win. Get your act together, get aggressive, because we're actually engaged as a voter base. This is really good news, to be honest with you. And again, don't underestimate, don't count it out. I would argue a very big reason for why a lot of the sleepy RINOs in the Deep South are actually doing their jobs now. So keep the pressure up. And by the way, take it to November, because, in the same way a lot of the RINOs in Indiana were arrogant, thinking, oh, MAGA's dead, the voter base isn't there, doesn't matter. Democrats on the flip side. Okay, now let's look across the border, across that moat, right? Same situation. Oh, we're going to dominate them. Everybody hates Trump. Well, we have a chance to prove them wrong. Just keep that in mind. That said, guys, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on that video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.